What purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Schiff of California. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section.
Request unanimous consent to dispense with the reading.
Is there objection? Clerk will suspend. Pursuant to House Resolution 287, the gentleman from California and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
I thank the Chairman. I rise today to urge my colleagues to support the amendment that I'm offering along with my Southern California colleague, Mr. Sherman. The amendment would allow the Burbank Bob Hope Airport to implement a nighttime curfew between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. and restore local control to the community that has been denied to them for decades. Thousands of residents of Southern California's San Fernando Valley who live under the flight paths or near the terminals at the Bob Hope Airport endure the house-shaking noise of air traffic during the day and suffer the jarring interruption of sleep that is caused by a roaring jet taking off or landing. I want to also distinguish this measure. I know my colleagues have heard some other curfew measures today, and without detracting from them, I want to point out that the facts of this one are quite different. I think a unique case in the case of Burbank Airport. When Congress passed the 1990 Airport Noise and Control Act, ANCA, it intended to permit airports to implement noise restrictions if they met certain requirements. At that time, Congress exempted several already voluntarily airports from the law's requirements for FAA approval of new noise rules if they had pre-existing noise rules in effect to address local noise concerns. So airports were grandfathered in when ANCA was passed. But because of a mistake, Bob Hope Airport, which had a curfew in place, did not get grandfathered in. The Bob Hope Airport in Burbank was one of the first airports in the country, in fact, to impose a curfew and has a long history of curfews, but unfortunately was not given the protection of the grandfather provision of ANCA that several other similar airports received. This amendment would correct this inequity and put Bob Hope on the same footing as several other airports across the country that had curfews before ANCA's passage. So it doesn't set a precedent in terms of other airports, and this would be uniquely confined to the situation involving Bob Hope. By correcting the omission of not allowing Bob Hope to implement on a permanent and mandatory basis the curfew, which it had in effect informally in the 1980s, we would return local control to the community that has sought it for years. It's also important my colleagues understand the impact this will have on aviation in Southern California. There'll be no impact on commercial flights, zero. Almost all commercial airlines already voluntarily abide by the voluntary curfew at Bob Hope, and the impact on general aviation will be limited to 2 nighttime landings. The impact, however, will be significant for people trying to get sleep that are disrupted by those small number of flights. So I urge my colleagues to support this, and I would be happy to yield a minute to my colleague from